Hello, my name is Margaret Adele, and welcome to a rambly late night discussion because life has been hectic, but I don't want to miss a Saturday video. So today I am discussing something that I've been thinking about for a while, and that is how to be friends with authors when you're a reviewer reading their work. Because this is kind of a thing that the bookish community online at large has agreed that you kind of shouldn't do. More or less. It's accepted that there should be this kind of professional barrier between reviewers and authors. And there's many reasons for this. The review could get muddled as the reviewer decides that they need to give the author's work a good review because of that relationship, or the author could feel kind of betrayed by a less than positive review from someone they consider their friend. And it can get kind of struggling with this close dynamic. However, I've noticed, as someone who reviews primarily indie, a lot of those ideas don't apply to me. And that's not to say that I am a super special butterfly, but the indie author community is functionally different than the traditionally published author community. That's not to say either one is worse, it's just different. For example, the power disparity between reviewer and author is much different in the indie scene. This is not to say that I am of equal social clout as every author I review, but it's a much smaller disparity for me to review, say, Destin Munden, who, while having a very strong following on Reddit and my reviews of his work tend to get strong views, does not have, say, a Sarah J. Maas following. So there's not as much of a risk, even if that author was to become angry, and I have had an author become angry at a poor review before. There's not much they can do to me personally. They can, maybe say some bad stuff about me, and to my knowledge, that author has never said anything bad publicly, but I'm not getting canceled by an author who's not mainstream popular. And also, there's this acceptance in the indie author community that we kind of are all just informal. You're not getting a lot of super ultra professionalism because it's indie. It's much more personable. I'm not getting emails, or at least not often getting emails, from PR people or from people at a publishing house. I get some from small indie publishing houses, but the majority of the time, the email comes directly from the author whose work I'm reviewing. I actually get a lot of people asking me how I can be so even-keeled in a review and find positive things even in a 2-star book, and I usually jokingly reply, well, it's different when you know the author is going to be reading or watching your review. I can usually tell when an author has read or watched the review because in a lot of cases, they'll actually message me back with clarifications on something that I was wondering about in the review. And I don't tend to ask a lot of questions before I write or film a review, only because I don't want my review to be colored by their words specifically. Despite the fact that I have a very close friendship with a lot of indie authors, I still believe that a work needs to stand on its own, and so I want to give my thoughts and opinions as I read the book on its own. So yes, there might be this giant backstory that changes how I view it, but the majority of people reading it aren't gonna know that, so me knowing that going in and having that change my opinions isn't very helpful. Although in that case, I will usually also say, I learned that there is a backstory to this, so that if you watch or read that review, you will then learn that as well and go in with a similar mindset to me. But the big thing is, how do I do it when an author that I am friends with asks me to review their book, and let's say I review it less than stellarly? This has not happened very often to me, mostly because a lot of my friendships with indie authors begin after I've already reviewed their book, and in most cases, it's a 4 or 5 stars. Now, I don't mean to say that I befriend these authors because their work is 4 to 5 stars, but it definitely helps that the beginning of the work relationship starts on such a positive note. And you can definitely tell that some of the indie authors I am very close to are also the ones whose work I have rated very highly. But there have also been other cases where I have gotten involved, at least becoming Twitter mutuals with certain indie authors on Twitter, per se, or indie authors that follow me and comment on my videos, and I become to know them that way, send me works, and I have not given them the most positive reviews. Now, to date, I have never given a book less than a 2-star. I have never done a 1-star indie review on my channel. That's not necessarily because I refuse to do it or I don't want to hurt feelings. It's mostly because I am an avid DNFer. And if I think a book is a 1-star as I'm reading it, I'll just stop reading it. Because in my mind, if I can tell early on that I'm really not liking it, I don't want to waste more of my own personal time to continue doing something I don't like for free. I'm not paid for this. My channel is not monetized. And then give the author a very bad review with no redeeming qualities. Like, no one wins in that situation. So I DNF. And I do not review a book that I have DNF'd because for all I know, there could be something at the very end of the book that redeems it and would up the star rating in some way, but I'm not going to risk, again, reading a book and not enjoying myself and not getting anything else out of that experience. And most of the time, for authors that I am friends with, it hasn't necessarily been a big issue. Like I mentioned, there was that one author, but we were not at all close. I don't think they ever even followed me on Twitter, which you don't have to if you're an indie author looking for a review. You don't have to follow me on Twitter or Goodreads or wherever. Now, I will tell you, if you're going to start like personally asking me to send you the link, I'm going to tell you to just follow me because I'll have those put up on all those sites, but you don't have to. So for the most part, whenever I give a 2-star review to an author who I knew well, like, it gets kind of awkward. And I remember there was one author that I gave a 2-star review to their book, and I noticed a significant drop in our interactions on Twitter, but I don't fault them for it. Like, it's awkward. We'll accept that it's awkward. Move on. But I think in a lot of cases, most of the indie authors understand that my work is to review their work. I am not reviewing them as a person, and for the most part, in almost every 2-star review, I will usually always say that I would consider reading something else from that person, even if I don't want to continue with that series or even if I wasn't a fan of that book. I would never close the door on future interactions or on future reviews from that author because of one poor reading experience. But I have closed the door on that one author because I can handle a lot, but you coming at me for a review will end everything real quick. And I also have preemptively closed the door before for authors that I did not directly interact with and that I have not reviewed, but I've seen them doing hinky things, especially like Romancelandia authors that started stuff. That I'll be like, all right, note down, we are not reviewing any works from that author. I will often close doors ahead of time just to make sure. But the thing is, what do I do when it's an author I'm super close to, and maybe it's not even that bad of a review, but it's not a 5-star, it's less. I have genuine criticisms of the book. Again, hasn't really been an issue. For example, the indie author that I am, by and large, the utmost closest to is Laura Diaz de Arce. I first reviewed her short story collection Monstrosity, and as it is October, I highly suggest it, and I gave it a resounding 5 stars. Since then, Laura and I have gotten incredibly close. She is one of my closest Twitter mutuals. We will regularly have phone calls that last upwards of 2.5 to 3 hours. There are certain things from my past that I have only told to a specific few people, and she is one of them. It's just, for whatever reason, it clicked for us. And I reviewed another one of her books after that. The review is not up yet because, again, life has been hectic. But it was not a glowing 5-star. No, it was still a pretty positive 4-star. But I had genuine criticisms of the book. And we were texting about my criticisms of the book because she'd read it on Goodreads. Because like I mentioned before, when you review indie authors' work, either video or on a place like Goodreads or maybe even in a blog post, they'll find it, they'll know. And she said, valid. The critiques were valid. And admittedly, I knew going into it that I might have more critiques than usual only because it was fantasy and I distinctly like her sci-fi and horror work more, but was a blip on the radar. Was no issue. And so my thinking is this. If you're getting into indie author work where regular face-to-face, more like screen-to-screen relationships are going to be a necessity because you will be dealing directly with that author in exchange for reviews, here's my thinking. Keep it professional at first. Start with the reviews. And then, once you've established that professional relationship and you genuinely feel there is some other connection there that is worth exploring and developing into a fuller relationship, then do it. Do not force the relationship. Do not attempt to make a friendship because the books were really good. For example, I am the biggest Shami Stovall stan, like ever. Like, still waiting on the sequel to Starmark Rising. Her books have gutted me. I think I have given every book she's ever sent me for review a 5-star. I would not call us very close friends. I would say we're probably friends, Twitter mutuals at the very least, but it is not to the extent that I am with Laura and with others. And that's fine. I still love her work. We still have a very good working relationship. I don't need to press for more if the relationship isn't there. But then there's authors like Travis Badon, who our friendship is, I believe, still in the earliest stages, but I do credit him with opening the door into MLM erotica and MLM romances in general for me, and own voices, obviously. But in that case, we had a different establishment for the relationship. It wasn't just that I was reviewing his work. He was helping me open up into this new community. And so it wasn't just that I was the reviewer reviewing his work. And if you want the relationship with authors, you gotta move past that kind of dynamic. Because a lot of cases when Laura and I are having those 3-hour-long talks, we're not just talking about her work. We might be talking about writing and joking around about, you know, she still owes me that Brujas in Space story, thank you, or the stuff that I want to write one day. But we talk about a ton of other stuff as well. So in reality, you really need to have a bigger relationship than just the review work and accept that in some cases, maybe just stick to the professional relationship. There's not a problem. In fact, I would say if you don't think there is a solid chance for a truly deep friendship that could survive negative critiques and move past it easily, then keep it strictly professional. And again, this is different from indie publishing to traditional publishing because indie publishing is a different community in general. They just know and accept at a greater level than a lot of traditional publishers that you have to take things in stride. They do not have the soft barriers of PRs or publishing houses or agents handling things for them. So as a result, indie authors tend to have thicker skin. Now, not all the time. There have been plenty of indie authors that have done nonsense as well. However, the community as a whole is also a lot quicker to jump on them for it. You will not find a lot of indie readers or other indie authors supporting an indie author ever pulling that kind of nonsense because the indie community recognizes that getting reviews is hard when you're an indie author, and one person attacking reviewers is bad for the community as a whole. And so there's this agreement, kind of unspoken, that we're of such similar power levels compared to reviewers versus traditionally published authors that you really got to keep the peace. So for the most part, whenever I see a lot of reviewers, they understand that they're reviewing self-published work and they're going to speak a certain way and they're not going to go ham tearing something apart. Now, I mean, some people on Goodreads might, but Goodreads has its own problems. Likewise, most indie authors accept that they are the face of their brand. They do not have someone to be padding between them, so they need to act in a certain way to maintain their end of it. So in reality, yes, reviewers and authors can 100% be friends as long as they're in the indie space. Maybe it could work with like mid-tier traditionally published authors, but even then you start getting into weird power dynamics and even like low-key talking about reviews you didn't like in a kind of blasé or anonymous way can still get iffy, because if you got hard enough stans, they're gonna seek out that reviewer and you're gonna have a messed up power dynamic going all over it. But in general, if you are looking to review indie works and you like to become part of the indie community in general, it works. You can do it perfectly well. You can make fantastic friends. I definitely feel like I'm a part of the community, even though I've never actually published something within it, at least not yet. But it's definitely a welcoming community. It's a community that understands the struggle and will really support you in your endeavors if you start reviewing those books. Because again, I just need more people reviewing indie books. I just need more like bookish people, booktubers, book bloggers, bookstagrammers to do this, because more love is needed. So this has been rambly enough, I would say, and I now have to make sure that the little gets to bed. Moving forward, I am trying to do some much more thought out videos. I've got some reading vlogs planned that I'm super excited for. I also have a very big, it's not an expose, discussion, I guess, planned that a lot of people have been asking for about foster parenting that will come maybe next week or the week after. But I got a lot of good things coming up for the end of the year, and I, of course, have a lot of indie reviews to be done. And for everyone that's been following along and has noticed that I haven't been posting any review videos, I have been reading indie books because I'm closed and I really want to get unclosed. So be prepared to just have your feeds spammed with my indie reviews as I finally get those videos filmed and put out once some things have passed and happened, and I'll get into that in future videos. But regardless, thank you so much if you've watched this whole weird rambly discussion video. Again, if you are interested in becoming a reviewer of indie work, I can make some connections for you. I could probably put you in contact with indie authors if you would like to begin that. So if you are a bookish person that has any kind of platform for reviewing and you want to get into indie books, please let me know. I would love to help bridges be built. Anyway, this has gone on long enough. So with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.